speakers today are Jean-Pierre and Yadin Larochette, who are multi-generational tapestry weavers who will tell us some about their tapestry journey. And I have their book here, which our members who've been using it heartily endorse, and you can, the information on buying it is on our website, on both on the link for this meeting and also in our Amazon store on the website. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you.
And let's, yeah,
here we go. Okay.
Oh, and please, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, she muted herself. I think, Virginia,
I did mute myself. I'm sorry. Yes, and okay, I need to, but I was saying, please mute your audio. And I think somebody tried to come in right when I was doing that. So let me see if I can get that.
And I just want to also make sure that the screen is up, that you can see the slide and you can hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Look.
Wonderful. Okay.
Well, good morning to everyone. Greetings from Berkeley.
Muted.
Okay. I think everyone can hear us now.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, well, greetings and good morning to everyone. The presentation about the book is about 30 minutes in PowerPoint. It includes a little bit of the Aubusson geographical area and its people, information on what is the status of tapestry currently, then a bit of family and how it plays in our own formation, our roots. And I should add that this project was conceived and realized in the Pacific coastal areas of the US in Mexico, where we live. It is based mostly in the Aubusson tradition, but come to light in a different. It was cultivated here, the product of being part of a vibrant grassroots community. Our gratitude to friends, colleagues, students, and patrons. Your support along the journey made this book possible. Yadin's introduction to the anatomy of a tapestry starts with a question. Should we open with what this book is or what is not? To what she has me answering, we should focus on what is, forget about what is not. For Yadin, the project was a tour de force carried on with love and passion after work hours, weekends, and holidays. For me, I have to confess, was a product of older age. During my over 60 years at the loom, I wove to earn a living. About 4 years ago, in grateful appreciation, I wanted to focus not so much in what you can do with it, but in an exploration of what the microcosm of the weave is.
Now a little bit about the history. In September of 2009, the General Assembly of UNESCO added Aubusson tapestry on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. In this document, Aubusson weavers are described as a community of professionals which, for more than 5 centuries, have kept alive the entire range of skills which go into the Aubusson tapestry.
Aubusson is located about 300 miles south of Paris. It's about a 5-hour ride. And it's located in the Nouvelle Aquitaine portion of southern France. The legendary Aquitaine was the land of troubadours, poets, musicians of the 12th and 13th centuries, and of Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine of the court of love, a broad-minded patron of the arts and one of the wealthiest women of her time. The language then was not French, but Occitan, still spoken today.
Traditional weavers in this region were mostly men, and in addition to their weaving skills, they were also famed stonemasons. And as a workforce, they were very active in the building of Paris, and especially in the mid-1800s under the direction of city planner Baron Haussmann. Carrying out a massive urban development program, they built boulevards and new housing. Because of their progressive political and social views, these workers had a rebellious activist reputation. From the time of the 1789 revolution up until World War I, they became a decisive force at the forefront of French social movements. According to historian Alfred Franklin, the quality of their work and the combined creative inherent in the act, the sense that the sum of their combined effort could produce a timeless edifice for all to see, generated among them a special physical comradeship, that some kind of spiritual union. And this same spirit of collective effort shines in the tapestries we cherish so much.
Novelist Georges Sand was born in the Indre department next to Creuse. She wrote extensively about the people of the region, about peasant life especially. She was the most read writer of her time, which has his contemporaries, Honoré Balzac, Victor Hugo, among others. She sold more books than both of them combined. She took her name from Jules Sandeau, so George Sand from Sandeau, who was an Aubusson writer who was her partner for the first years of her career. During her stay at Chateau Boussac, where she wrote Jeanne, the book you can see here, she discovered behind a fake or false wall in her own bedroom the iconic tapestries of the Lady and the Unicorn that has been hiding there for probably over 100 years. The drawing of one of the tapestry scenes is by her son Maurice, then a teenager. It is thanks to her effort that eventually the tapestries were transported to Paris and today are at the Cluny Museum, the Museum of the Middle Ages. My grandparents, Jules and François Rosalie, were born in Aubusson in the 1870s, who were both weavers. He was also a stonemason. In times of need, along with neighboring craftsmen, he will walk the 300 miles to the construction site of Paris, a journey that took about 10 days. Around the turn of the 20th century, a younger generation of weavers, my father among them, would take their weaving skills throughout Europe and to other continents. Armand, my father, established his first tapestry workshops in Buenos Aires, Argentina. His cousin, Jacques Gaillet, came to the United States in 1895 and wove for William Baumgarten in Williamsbridge, New York City.
While traveling in Argentina in the 1930s, my grandfather fell in love with the remote South, the region known as Patagonia. Eventually, he established a second workshop there in 1948 when Jean-Pierre was 6 years old. Jean-Pierre left Patagonia at 17, but as it happened, during a visit there with my mother, Yayaluri, 10 years later, it's where I was born. Patagonia is a harsh, rugged land of great beauty, with a rich and tragic history. One of the many cultural achievements of the native Mapuche communities who live on both sides of the Andes Mountains in Chile and Argentina are their textile traditions.
The impact of two different textile visions, the figurative Aubusson pieces of my father's atelier and the weavings of intricate geometry beautifully created by our Mapuche neighbors, have been at the heart of my love and appreciation of weaving. It gave my young apprenticeship a sense of exploration and discovery. In the juxtaposition of the two dissimilar worlds, there was magic. The awareness and admiration for other visions reinforced my interest in the textile culture of my ancestors. The Mapuche weave is word-faced and the figures created at the looms are distilled into symbols. The vision is conceptual, reflecting a deep sense of harmony and balance. Chilean anthropologist Pedro Meje Rosso described the theme of this rag as containing information regarding the medicinal use of chilco, a type of fuchsia flower, for heart-related disease. Heart-related disease. The elements of the compositions are hearts, veins, and the chilco flower. These representations are different than the ones we are used to in our culture. An object is turned into a textile design by a series of mental steps. The first is a vertical or horizontal cut, which unfolds the image into symmetrical mirror image parts. Other similar transformative steps follow. Aubusson tapestry is weft face, figurative, and traditionally follows a design previously conceived. Landscape designer John Williamson points out that the unicorn in captivity depicts 26 plants, some of them well known in their medicinal botany. Building up the weave, following shapes, and the interaction of color through systematic hatchings are key elements of this technique.
The role of tapestry through history as an object of prestige is well documented. In Europe, there's even a touch of the divine, as they were much desired by popes, kings, and queens. Tapestry historian Thomas Campbell wrote that Henry VIII owned such a vast collection that if hung side by side, they would have covered 4 miles. Major artists of all ages, in love with the fabulous proportions of the medium, dreamt of their paintings being woven into tapestry. Throughout the centuries, tapestry adapted to the demands and styles of the times to the extent that often, in order to succeed, it had to pretend to be what it is not, as in, it is not a painting.
In what consists, however, the savoir-faire, the know-how that was being celebrated so much? In that regard, there is a surprising absence of documentation. The Diderot d'Alembert Encyclopedia of the Art and Science, published in 1751, dedicates 37 pages to tapestry, illustrated with wonderful engravings that are very popular in most historical books. Yet, there is not a single description of technique.
In December of 2015, the Getty Center presented the exhibition Woven Gold, the Tapestries of Louis XIV. I was invited to give a series of talks and weaving demonstrations. Aware of the limited number of existing technical diagrams in tapestry literature, Jean-Pierre set to create some of his own for me to use. What was intended to cover a couple of basic techniques led him on an adventure that has lasted 3 years.
The idea of writing a tapestry book has been in the back burner, so to speak, for many years. Some 30 years ago, when Yadin was an art history student at UC Berkeley, we were already exchanging ideas about a book on tapestry.
The intention is to inspire by looking at the why behind techniques in conservation ethics and protocols.
The anatomy of a tapestry book, however, grew organically. The first considerations related to the medium for the diagrams, ink or graphite, and scale. What are the minimum amounts of warps I need for each technique? Then, to my surprise, I noticed that my fingers knew more than my mind did. I have to warp a small loom and diligently copy pass after pass, starting with the simplest techniques. These drawings are about 14 by 18 inches. The microcosm of the interaction of just two colors, seldom three, fascinated me. The process acquired unexpected dimensions. Since I was illustrating weavings, why not include actual weavings of the illustrations? For clarity, I wove these models with cotton twine at 8 warps per inch.
Tapestry weave has two distinct faces, the front and the back, that do not look exactly alike. To illustrate that effect, Jean-Pierre wove the models for the book twice, once from the back and once from the front. To keep the weave under tension for photography purposes, he mounted each pair on mount board. These models are scanned and printed at actual size.
Having now diagrams and models, I invited a couple of weaving friends to work from them. During this stage, I realized that for a more complete and meaningful study, I should weave small pieces exploring each technique. To keep the printing actual size, these applications of techniques are about 5 by 5 inches. At this point, I had two very helpful collaborations. My partner, designer Yael Lurie, refining the compositions of the applications of techniques, and weaver Mary Lane from Olympia, Washington, editing and keeping each text descriptions as concise as possible. We organized the material in 9 chapters. The first 4 relating to weaving are entitled Views from the Loom with a Glimpse into History, Techniques, Woven Musings, Finding Metaphors in Everyday Practice, and Functions of the Tapestry Loom.
The next 4 chapters are dedicated to conservation, titled Materials, Notes on Finishing and Display, Notes on Care, and Notes on Storage. The 9th chapter, A Weaver's Path, shows personal explorations of tapestry by contemporary artists in the regions of the United States and Mexico. The first chapter, Views from the Loom with a Glimpse into History, opens with a definition of tapestry. In its broad definition, the term tapestry includes all types of wall hangings, be hand-woven, embroidered, or machine-made. For example, one of the best-known historical pieces described as tapestry, the 11th century Bayeux cloth, is not a tapestry at all, but a very large embroidery. Technically, we define tapestry as a distinctive woven structure known as a discontinuous weft plain-faced weave. Tapestries are hand woven under high tension, allowing for full coverage of the warp by the weft.
The historical section is a brief survey of the technical and artistic development of tapestry since the Middle Ages. From Jean Bondol Angers Apocalypse in the 14th century to Jean-Luc Saint in the 20th, special attention is given to tapestry association with painting. For example, the pack, the very painterly image at the center, was designed in 1730 by Jean-Baptiste Audry, court painter and the director of the Gobelin workshop, tapestry workshop in Paris. It required an extremely fine weave in a great number of colors. On the other hand, both Jean Bondol in the 1300s and Jean-Luc Saint in modern times were designers well aware of the inherent potential of the medium, and they designed specifically for it. The chapter concludes with brief notes on tapestry durability and on the traditional methods of weaving from the reverse, which results in a mirror image of the design, and from side to side, rather than from the bottom up.
It's the word.
With a note on the so often asked question, how long does it take to weave a tapestry? Paraphrasing weaver Lisa Trujillo of Chimayo, New Mexico, who wrote, "Our weavings are created primarily of wool and time," I would design an imaginary label stating 10% cotton, 10% wool, 80% time.
And a note that the average time for an average texture of a weave on an average design, all average, is about a month per square yard.
Yes, tapestry weaving is a very slow process. A woven form grows row by row, much as a text is written one word at a time. The left section of this tapestry illustrates the over and under movement of the weft across the warp.
Right.
The warp threads, the vertical white bars in the image, are firmly attached and stretched on the loom. They are the structural foundation of the weave. Toward the right of the tapestry, coming from the interaction of warp and weft, forms are born. Much like pixels in an image, the finer the weave, the sharper and more detailed the result.
Love Letters was designed by Yael based on work spanning from the time of my parents' first collaborations half a century ago in 1966. Visually, it's a reference to a variety of techniques which we present under three categories: shapes, patterns, and lines. The aim of these studies is not to offer a mechanical approach of technique, but rather a holistic one, using tapestry techniques as a means for expressing visual ideas.
For clarity, when working on the diagrams, I separated each pass as seen before the compacts down the weave. These were like snapshots of the weft in action. Looking into the details of this drawing, fascinated by the Mondrian-like compositions with their well-balanced visions of space and structural simplicity, I couldn't resist but weave them. Each of these pieces are about 15 by 15 inches. It is being said that repetition is the essence of tradition. As one delves into the nature of the weave, another aspect that emerges is the value of repetition. The process carries on a ritualistic form, not generated by machine. It is mindful and organic, ever-changing. Tapestry gift to the weaver is to embody the repetition repetitive motion of the work, the rhythm of the hand, making it visible in images of vibrant tessellations.
Techniques are the synthesis decanted from centuries of weaving explorations. Observing the many ways in which the parts interact, metaphorical lessons emerge. In shaping, we observe shapes are woven upon shapes, each one the foundation of the next. All the shapes that make a tapestry are equally important. Foreground and background, positive and negative spaces, all require the same skill and effort. Two or more colors are needed to create a shape. A single color cannot create a tapestry. A tapestry is made of hundreds of shapes interacting in concert with each other.
Chapter 4 is a brief examination of the mechanics of tapestry looms. The most important component of a tapestry loom is its tensioning device. To weave tapestry, the work must be tightly stretched. The two basic systems are expansion and rotation. Some looms use both systems. The top two sketches show methods of expansion for high warp looms, a traditional Navajo and a modern pipe loom in the late Archie Brennan's style. The Aubusson bas-relief or low warp combine both systems, adding rotation to expansion. The sketch on the bottom left illustrates an early rope and lever method. On the right, a modern adaptation using metal parts such as rackets, poles, and Acme screws. During the last 35 years, we were happy and proud to have Yadin occasionally working with us, be in weaving commissions or in editing and writing projects. This is our first co-writing collaboration. Her expertise and experience in textile conservation adds vastly to the aim of this book. With text graphic design by Yael, she opened the 5th chapter listing 7 of the most used fibers. Natural and synthetics are described in detail with insights on their historical backgrounds.
Before a tapestry is hung for display, hundreds of hours of careful work can go into the preparation. Chapter 6 discusses methods of finishing and display, as well as methods of binding ends, closing slits, and lining and mounting tapestries in both large and small format. Preservation, conservation, and restoration methods are discussed in Chapter 7. Tapestries are vulnerable to all sorts of forces, and understanding these forces can help mitigate damage. Preservation aspects include proper handling, preventing light damage, insect and pest management, air quality, and display locations. Surface cleaning, washing, and local stain reduction are also discussed. For weavers, galleries, and collectors, hopefully the storing information in Chapter 8 is useful. For both small formats or large pieces, proper storage methods are crucial to ensure the longevity of tapestries as well as other artworks. The chapter ends with tips for packing a tapestry for transport and installation.
The weaver method of working is usually dictated by tradition. It is fascinating to see how the basic two threads, warp and weft, can be used in so many different and eloquent ways. The chapter, A Weaver Path, is a brief visit to this array of expressions. Here to the left is At the Window by Archie Brennan from Dovecot, Scotland. At the bottom is Archie weaving among sheep in New Zealand. And to the right, Saltillo Shroud by Irving Trujillo from Centinela Traditional Arts in Chimayo, New Mexico.
To the left, Aire Zapoteco by Erasto Mendoza Ruiz from Tetutlán del Valle, Oaxaca, Mexico. And to the right, Du Milieu by Susan Martin Maffei from New York. From left to right, Watermelon by Jackie Willenberg from Fort Bragg, California. So Between by Kathy Todd Hooker from Albany, Oregon. And An Homage to House Painters by Gabriel Canales from Guadalajara, Mexico.
We end with this very brief comparative study, a subject that certainly merits volumes, with, to the left, Transitional Revival by Barbara Teller Ornelas from Two Gray Hills, New Mexico, and March Grass by Julia Mitchell from Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts. I think it's interesting to note that the centuries-old tapestry schools of France, which programs used to range from 3 to 7 years, do not have technical textbooks. It is the direct teaching of master weavers and the commitment of young apprentices that generation after generations have kept this tradition vibrantly alive. We dedicate this presentation to two weavers that sadly have departed while this work was in progress. The much missed are Gabriel Canales of Guadalajara, Mexico, and Archie Brennan of New York, both dear friends and exceptional artists. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now let's see. As, lots of applause. Does anyone have questions for our speakers? And I'm also going to scroll down the chat. Sometimes people put questions in the chat. Well, I have a question about, this is more the conservation question, which is one of the things that's very striking about older tapestries, the kinds of tapestries you often see in traditional museums, is that the colors have unevenly faded. And I just wondered if there's anything you can speak to on that issue, on how to get audiences to perceive the tapestries as they were originally woven. Just any comments you might have on that specific issue.
When you see dramatic differences, that often means that there have been rewoven areas, and they would traditionally there were restorations where they would reweave vast areas of a tapestry, and those would fade differently, usually faster than the original. So when you see big differences like that, and actually the unicorn, Lady in the Unicorn series at the Cluny is a perfect example of that, where moisture rose and damaged the lower portion of the series. I think all of them, no? Mm-hmm. And so they rewove, like I think maybe up to 2 feet on each tapestry is restoration. And you see that faded more than the original. So that's key there. And I think it shows the history of the work. It shows, what the work has gone through. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's part of the story of the work. And hopefully exhibition labels help kind of define that. I don't know if the Cluny does, but that's one reason. Another is that, and this is also process and story, is if different dye lots were used and one was more fixed than the other, you would have transitions like that. or they would run out of a color and then try to reintegrate a new color in that's somewhat similar, but maybe not exact. So there are various reasons why colors may be different on, one section from.
I was also thinking about some types of dyes fading more than others, just so that the blues are truer than the, I don't know, whatever, reds.
That's a good example, right? And that's something I mentioned in the book is, traditionally to create green, they would use a blue and a yellow dye stuff and combine them, over dye them. And the yellows tend to be more fugitive than the blues. The blues tend to be more stable, and therefore we end up with blue trees and a lot of like verdures, that you see. So yes, that's another reason. And it can be quite dramatic when you see the front that's been exposed to light versus the back that has been covered. You can actually, usually the backs really tell what the original looked like. And I know there have been efforts in some museums to kind of bring that to light with actual lighting, projecting a slide over or projecting colors over the tapestry to kind of bring back the original, but it's really time consuming and not entirely effective to do that. So, but I know that there have been efforts to kind of bring the essence back. Another option that I've seen museums do is use Photoshop and have the label or a panel showing what the original may have looked like by just doing it digitally on an image of the actual piece. But a lot of the tapestries, when you see historical works that are looking really pristine, it's most likely because they were rarely shown. They were rolled, they were maybe just, they would be displayed once a year for a holy day or for only special occasions.
Someone asked if it would be possible to see again the small tapestry loom with the movable frame. This was one of your slides.
Tapestry loom with the movable frame. Oh, that one. I think maybe it's the one with me. This last one.
Probably there is one.
Oh, I need to share the screen though. Hold on a second. Go to slideshow. But I need to go here and share my screen. So you're gonna have to bear with me for just a second while I find it. So this is actually a loom that Jean-Pierre designed for students. This is the one I use. And he designed it back in the early 70s, and it's also shown here. This is the same loom, probably actually maybe even the exact same loom, because that's me, and that's my friend Dolores, and that's my brother back in the early 80s. So yeah, so Jean-Pierre designed this loom specifically for students to be able to see the front rather than, with a traditional low warp you can't really see, and to be able to transport. It's really easy to take apart and
it's a hybrid in the sense that it works with straddles with the same principles of the low warp loom. And I'm using it now, this frame tilted. For the last 4 years, working on this book, which includes probably 60 weavings that I have to do for the book. And all of them, or most of them, done in the small loom. I realized that my arms were failing, that I have to work more like I'm used to, horizontal looms. I can have my hands resting on the warp. So I'm tilting the loom in an angle, which worked perfectly well.
Let's see, there was another question here. So there's a question, what is the connection between stonemasons and weaving? Were they making tools that worked in both professions? Like, what is the...
No, well, I'll let Jean-Pierre speak to that.
Yeah.
it was two traditions that were used by the people at the time according to the commercial value of them. When tapestry weaving was low, they would hire themselves as stonemasons. My grandfather, for example, built his own house out of stone. They were stone cutters, but he was also a weaver, meaning when things were economically well, he will be hired as a weaver in a downtown workshop studio. Those places could employ up to 60 people. And when things were rough, he will hire himself as a stonemason. So it's the same people doing just two different things.
How did the training work with those two seemingly very different professions? Like, were you cutting, weaving? You talked about the tradition of weaving being passed down and the techniques being taught, but what about stonemasonry?
The same. Actually, I was really surprised and fascinated by a study on the stonemasons of Creuse that was done by an American from Wyoming. Because of the reason for that, I would find his name, but the reason for that was that, here is it. Can you give it to me? Was that the name of the author is Casey Harrison, and the book is The Stonemasons of Creuse in 19th Century Paris. And the reason for that book, which was a university paper originally, is the importance of this group of people in the social making fabric of France. They were very special fellows, much as Yadin described earlier, in the forefront of social.
Sorry, we're having people entering.
The way that they were trained is equal, is the same way I was trained, not as a mason, but as a weaver, looking when you are little, imitating your, parents.
Let me see, we had some other questions. Leslie, do you want to ask your question? It might be easier.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the book, I had thought that you wove the samples from the back, but then just photographed them from the front. But did I hear you say correctly that you wove them twice, once from the back and once from the front?
Yes.
Do you have a preferred method, and how do you decide which you will do for any given project?
Well, in the book, we explain why tapestries traditionally has been woven from the back. I wouldn't, try to go through the many reasons for this now, but about the question whether how I wove them. Well, actually, I wove them 4 times, because the first time I wove them, I wove one from the front, cut it off, and then wove the other one from the back, right? So actually, it was the same piece, photographed from the front and photographed from the back. Yeah. And then talking with the publisher, I realized that it would be very confusing for them to go that way, because they wanted to scan the pieces, not photograph them. So the second time I wove these models was to make sure that my drawings or portraits of them were right, which I found few problems. So in that loom, in the vertical loom, I can just move around and weave from the front or the back as I wish, right? Well, I'm a back, I reverse, side weaver. I had a terrible time working from the front, especially because even though that you handle 2 colors, I cannot imagine handling, 30 or 40 like in a regular piece. But just the many weft movements really call to weave from the back. You know, you have loops, you have tails, you have all these things that make so much sense to live in the back. So yes, I did go around. I wove first the back, then I move around the loom. Only in very few models, the very simple ones, I could do it imagining, you know, that I was around the loom, but I wove them from the front in the same sitting position.
I mean, I understand the theory that it's preferable to weave from the back, but personally, it's always been so, as a beginner, as a learner, harder for me to do it that way. But then, like, I was trying to do your exercises in the hills and valleys, or whatever your terminology is, I would get confused because it's opposite depending on.
Correct. Well, the book doesn't intend to be a manual, you know, really as much as a reference book. Most weavers today, if you think in terms of, you know, Western style tapestry weavers or European style tapestry weavers, if you think in terms of Navajo or Rio Grande, they are all working, or let's go south of the border to Oaxaca, they are all working from the front. So this is a tradition that is being lost. And this is really why I believe, you know, I have the enthusiasm to go through 4 years of this, you know, kind of labyrinth, because I understand that it would make it difficult for weavers to reverse the ideas, but the ideas are there. And when you try to reverse them, I think that the lesson you will learn, you know, would be a good one. Your effort will count.
Okay, so let's see. Someone asked, does the small loom Jean-Pierre designed have tension adjustment? Lots of people would be interested in loom plans. Is this a possibility?
I can show the slide of.
Yeah, right.
The tension slide.
Yeah, yes, there are very simple tension device. These looms are, I used to produce them with my son when he was a university student, but I have, this was like 20 years ago. I never had a blueprint really of this loom. I have a rough drawing that I passed around, but then I discovered that some people were commercial building them, and so I stopped passing around the blueprints. No, I do not have a blueprint for this. The tensioning mechanism will be in,
let me see if I can.
This
and this one.
Right, right.
There, doesn't really show the. Oh.
Yeah, here on the top right is a. We don't have the one exactly.
There's.
But there is enough information
yeah.
there. We have two different, you know, there are 3 different ways. Our work are different, a little bit different than this, but you see, you to expand the warp toward the upper beam. That is what you got to do. So you do it with an Acme screw, like the one on the right-hand side is an Archie Brennan pipe loom, or you do it Navajo style with a rope like in the left. Both, you know, the product of both is this. We use a similar system.
Someone asked, what wool do you prefer? Let's see. Yeah, what wool do you prefer to use? Or do you even use wool? Do you use other, what?
Yes, you know, this has been a problem lately. I buy tapestry yarns wherever I find them. In Europe, of course, you know, there are very good sources. Here we used for many years Paternaean, the crewel from Paternaean, but this operation is closed, no? It's not.
They're still offering, but at a limited capacity, as far as I could tell.
So a fine rather, than a coarse yarn that you can blend to create colors, it's a general rule of thumb. The weft shouldn't be larger than the warp. The gauge of the weft should equal or be less than the gauge of the warp. But if you can blend several threads, ends, you are better off, because that allows you to create color combinations by mixing them on the bobbin, and also give you a sharper, more efficient forming.
Yeah, and I think also, it's all personal preference as to the actual brands that people would want to use. But one thing to keep in mind is that the longer staple yarn, the less fuzzy, and you want to avoid fuzzy. So one thing that I like to do personally is sometimes go to needlework shops that carry all the materials for needlework, and they tend to like the same kind of yarns as well. So they usually have a large array. And there's one actually, since you're in Southern California, in Santa Monica, Artemisia, I think is the name of it, if I'm not mistaken. And they have a really nice large selection. So then you don't have to commit yourself to large quantities. You can buy small quantities, decide which works for you. And then you can order, obviously, from online or direct.
Great. Well, thank you so much. The presentation, I am recording it. I'll make a few edits so we don't get some of the early chat talk, and I will post it on our site. There are actually at least 3 different ways to see our recorded programs. One is to go to the calendar on the SCHG website and just find the event as if it were forthcoming. It'll still be there. And I put the video at the bottom. There's also an archive that's in our members section. And then I also have on Vimeo, which I use to put these up. Under my Vimeo account, I have a SCHG section, which I can post the links for that in our forums. But thank you so much. It was great. And again, encourage people to buy the book and buy and peruse and learn from these great weavers. Thank you.